The Indian monsoon has arrived. The Western Ghats, a chain of mountains that run along the west coast of India, are the first to receive this life-giving bounty. But the Ghats are greedy. They act as a dam for these rivers in the sky. The plentiful monsoon winds, thus blocked, empty their precious cargo of rain onto the mountains, creating a long rain shadow to the east. While the Western Ghats luxuriate in dense forests, the drier eastern plains and Deccan Plateau make do with what little they get. Here, the rain comes later and is more fitful. As a result, this vast plateau covering most of central peninsular India is a savanna.
We are headed out to the field now to look for the last species of animal that we need to capture in this area, which is the striped hyena. So our team has been working quite hard for the last 10-15 days trying to find the location where we can trap them, and it's taken a lot of effort to find this place. It started with interviewing the villagers nearby, and then setting up camera traps to see their movement, and finally baiting them so that they would come to this place where we can then set up the traps. So we're going to go and try tonight to see if we can capture them and fit them with a GPS collar.
A team of scientists and conservationists led by Dr. Vanak and Dr. Maria Thakur started a study to understand the threatened and fast-changing grassland ecosystems and how the species that use these landscapes adapt to human pressures and changes. They decided to focus on a set of species that are rarely studied and which we know very little about, the mesocarnivores.
So a mesocarnivore is a small to medium-sized carnivore. 15 kilos or less is usually what we use to define a mesocarnivore. They fit in the food web right in the middle. And so usually people think of predators as tigers and leopards, and they're the top predators of an ecosystem. And they play fantastic roles in structuring what a food web does. But mesocarnivores, by being in between, actually play a really special role. They not only eat everything smaller, so most of them are omnivorous, so they're going to eat lizards and rodents, but they also eat seeds and fruit. So they fill this really interesting intermediate role in a food web. Plus, they can be food to the predators that are above them, so the larger predators. So understanding what's happening at that level gives us really interesting insights as to how the food web is structured and how important it is to have so many players. When we study organisms like mesocarnivores, they're small, they're elusive on the landscape, they're in and out of agricultural areas, they're in and out of the grasslands. We often can ignore them. And we think that their role in the ecosystem is trivial, right? They're eating seeds, they're eating rodents. But if we pay close attention to where they're going and what they're doing, it actually allows us to piece together the puzzle. Are they going to certain parts of the landscape because there's something special there? Is there water? Is there food that's different from other parts of the landscape? Now, the only way to get information like that is to track. And so to put trackers or tags on animals and follow them continuously, which means then we can watch their lives unfold and their use of the landscape unfold right in front of us. It tells us so much about this environment.
The drier parts of the central Indian region are dominated by savanna grasslands. The team spent a lot of time trying to find a location that was home to a wide variety of mesocarnivores, but also had human activity.
So we did a fairly large scale survey of savanna ecosystems because that's what I was particularly interested in studying. And the reason we eventually chose Baramati was it has a good mix of everything that we're looking for. It's got the grasslands, it's got rain-fed agriculture, it has irrigated agriculture, it has some industrial areas, it has human settlements. There's also poultry farms coming up all over the place. Given all of those things, this landscape was really well suited for that.
To undertake a long-term project of this kind, the team set up a field station, procured high-end equipment, and trained a team of passionate individuals. Abhijit Kulkarni, a field expert with a wide experience of catching and collaring animals, PhD student Anjan Khatna, and vet Pramod Mahajan, along with research assistants Pradeep Satpute, Pranav Panvalkar, and many other researchers were a part of the project. Once the right set of people were identified, choosing the right set of equipment was important for the project to achieve its objectives. Two types of specialized equipment were crucial for the success of the project: traps to capture animals and collars and receivers to track them.
So these are the traps we use for catching the smaller mammals, the small carnivores. Now these are different from the ones that you would have seen, the foothold traps that poachers sometimes use. Those big metal jaw ones that can actually harm an animal pretty badly. But these have a rubber padding here. Okay. And the traps we use depend on the size of the animal that we're catching. So for something like a fox or a jungle cat, which is quite a small animal, this kind of a smaller trap is used. This is a number 1 padded Victor. And it's, for that animal, this is pretty harmless. I'll show you. Okay. The collars we use in this project are GPS collars. So they have a GPS unit on top. And this is the thing that gets the location. Okay, and there's a battery. So the main consideration is that the weight of this entire unit has to be less than 3% of the body weight of the species that we are working with. So something this size is good for the hyenas, but this is way too big, obviously, for any of the other species. So for that, we use much smaller collars. Now the trade-off, of course, is that the smaller the battery size, the less the life of the collar itself. So this is something we would use for a jungle cat, for instance. Once the battery drains off from a collar, then we try and retrieve the collar from the animal. So then we have to trap the animal again. So because we don't want to leave an animal with a collar that's non-functional out there. Or if we feel that we've got enough data, we let the animal go just by fitting a ear tag on it, so we know that this animal has been caught before. The use of technology to understand how animals move or how they utilize the environment is actually quite old. We've been doing this for more than 60, 70 years globally. But in India, the first animals that were tagged started sometime in the late 70s under Project Tiger, where a bunch of herbivores species were tagged, so cheetal, sambar, and so on. I think one of the most high-profile projects that really brought telemetry to public attention was Dr. Ullas Karan's study of tigers, where he had put VHF collars on tigers. Okay, so in the last 10 years or so, easily more than 50 species have been GPS tagged or VHF tagged as well. We are able to study species as small as insects to as large as elephants. With the kind of work that we're doing here, we're getting really good data on how do some of the lesser known species, things like jackals, foxes, jungle cats, how are they using their landscapes and what are the challenges that they are facing in adapting to some of the changes that they're seeing in the environment.
तर ॲनिमल कॅप्चरिंगसाठीची प्रोसिजर जी सुरू होते ती बेसिकली साईन सर्वेजवरनं होते, की आम्ही पहिल्यांदा फील्डवरती जातो, सायन्स चेक करतो आणि त्या ठिकाणी जाऊन मग ट्रॅक प्लॉट तयार. ट्रॅक प्लॉट म्हणजे काय, ते 1 मीटर बाय 1 मीटरचा एरिया क्लिअर करणे, त्याच्यावरती फाईन डस्ट टाकणे आणि तिथे एक ल्युअर असतं आमच्याकडे, एक बेसिकली एक केमिकल म्हणू शकतो आपण त्याला, की जे थोडंफार त्याच्यातनं दुर्गंधी निर्माण करतं. तर हे तिथे ठेवलं जातं. सुरुवातीचे 1-2 दिवस फक्त हीच प्रोसिजर फॉलो होते. साधारणपणे 3ऱ्या दिवशी आम्ही तिथे कॅमेरा ट्रॅप्स लावायला सुरुवात करतो. जे बेसिकली ऑटोमेटेड असतात, की जिथे समोर काही मोशन झाली, काही हालचाल झाली की तो कॅमेरा फोटो किंवा व्हिडिओ काढतो आणि मग आम्ही बघतो की काय प्रेझेन्स येत आहेत तिथे, कुठले कुठले ॲनिमल्स येत आहेत आणि मग ती प्रोसिजर आम्ही अजून 1-2 दिवस पुढे कंटिन्यू ठेवतो. त्याच्यानंतर हे त्याच्यामध्ये कन्फर्म होतं की साधारणपणे ॲनिमल्सची त्या ट्रॅक प्लॉटवरती येण्याची वेळ काय आहे आणि मग असे मल्टिपल ट्रॅक प्लॉट्स असतात एरियामध्ये आणि त्या टायमिंगवरनं आम्ही ठरवतो की सगळ्यात लवकर कुठल्या ट्रॅक प्लॉटवरती ॲनिमल येतो आहे. तर असे ट्रॅक प्लॉट्स निवडले जातात फक्त ॲनिमल ट्रॅपिंगसाठी ॲक्च्युअली. आणि मग तिकडे आम्ही जे ट्रॅप डिप्लॉय करतो, जे वेगवेगळ्या साईजेसचे स्पीशीज साईजप्रमाणे जे ठरलेले असतात ते ट्रॅप डिप्लॉय करून तिथे त्याला एक रेडिओ कॉलर लावतो बाजूला, ज्याच्याला एक मॅग्नेट असतं. जसं ॲनिमल त्याच्यामध्ये ट्रॅप होतो त्याच्या हालचालीनी झटापटीनी ते मॅग्नेट पुल होतं आणि आम्ही जिथे थांबलेलो असतो तिकडे आम्हाला त्याचा सिग्नलला सुरुवात होतं की आम्हाला कळतं ॲनिमल ट्रॅप झालेलं आहे. ॲनिमल ट्रॅप झाल्यानंतर त्याला साधारणपणे इंजेक्शन दिल्यापासून ते एक साधारणपणे 6 ते 7 मिनटामध्ये तो व्यवस्थितपणे बेशुद्ध अवस्थेत जातो. तिथून त्याला आम्ही उचलतो आणि आमच्या ऑपरेटिंग टेबलवरती आणतो.
So anytime we handle an animal, there is an inherent risk involved in that. So there's a risk to the animal itself and there's a risk to us. Only way to safely handle animals that are also potentially dangerous to us and can even cause harm to themselves is by chemically sedating them. Okay, so we use a combination of drugs to sedate these animals so that they are calm and they go to sleep, so that we can safely do all the things that we need to do. Also, it's less stressful for the animal, because if you hold it down physically, then it's continuously under stress. But once you tranquilize it, it calms them down, it puts them to sleep, and they wake up without any after effects, any significant after effects.
मग टेबलवरती आणल्यानंतर सगळ्यात पहिलं काम जे असतं ते म्हणजे कॉलर करणे, जे मेन पार्ट आहे आमचा. तर पहिल्यांदा कॉलर केली जातं सगळ्यात पहिल्यांदा. त्यासाठी एक बेसिक थंब रूल आहे आमचा, की कॉलर जेव्हा आम्ही करतो तेव्हा कुठला जरी ॲनिमल असेल तर त्या गळ्यात कॉलर फिट केल्यानंतर त्याच्यात 2 अशी बोटं सहजपणे पास झाली पाहिजेत, एवढी ती कॉलर लूज असली पाहिजे जेव्हा तो पूर्ण अडल्ट ॲनिमल असतोच. आणि तेव्हाही ठेवतं. त्याचं कारण असतं की समजा फिमेल असेल तर प्रेग्नन्सीच्या वेळेला त्यांचं वेट गेन होऊ शकतं. कॉलर टाईट होऊन ते चोक होऊ नये, ॲनिमलला काही त्रास होऊ नये, या सगळ्याचा विचार करून तो एक थंब रूल आहे की 2 बोटं जातील एवढी कॉलर लूज असली पाहिजे. त्याच्यानंतर मग केलं जातं त्याचं ब्लड सॅम्पल घेतलं जातं आणि कंटिन्युअसली डॉक्टर आणि माझे असिस्टंट जे लोक असतात ते लोक त्याचा रेस्पायरेशन आणि बॉडी टेम्परेचरवरती मॉनिटर करत असतात की ॲनिमल व्यवस्थित आहे ना, काही प्रॉब्लेम नाही आहेत वगैरे, ह्या गोष्टींचं लक्ष दिलं जातं. आणि मग मॉर्फोमेट्रिक्स केलं जातं, त्याच्यामध्ये साधारणपणे पूर्ण शरीराची लांबी, शेपटीची लांबी, मागच्या पुढच्या पायांची लांबी, दात, त्याच्या जी स्कल साईज काय आहेत, म्हणजे मेजरमेंट, हेड मेजरमेंट आणि लेंथ वगैरे ह्या गोष्टी डिटेल्स घेतल्या जातात अगदी. आणि त्याचं सगळ्यात शेवटी वजन केलं जातं की त्याचं पूर्णपणे बॉडी वेट किती होतं. हे घेतल्यानंतर ॲनिमल रिकवर होईपर्यंत साधारणपणे एक 20 ते 25 मिनटाचा कालावधी जातो, ज्याला आम्ही थोडा वेळ कव्हर करून ठेवतो. आणि टोटल ॲनेस्थेशिया इफेक्ट संपल्यानंतर तो व्यवस्थित रिकवर झाल्याची खात्री पटली की मग आम्ही त्याला रिलीज करतो.
The process of capturing and collaring was not as easy as the researchers first imagined. Some of these mesocarnivores have not been extensively studied. These animals were in a human-modified habitat and were far more wary than their wilder counterparts. Each of these species presented their own set of difficulties, and the team had to learn to adapt their capture processes to counter the wily animals.
So each of these species of animals presents its own, challenges when you're trying to plan a capture. So foxes are generally the easiest species to capture. Foxes are not too trap shy. They are kind of fooled quite easily.
जसे जेवढे ह्युमन्स आहेत किंवा जेवढे सेटलमेंट्स आहेत त्याच्या कारणाने कुत्रे पण तेवढेच आहेत. तर आम्ही जेव्हा बेट करतो तेव्हा सगळ्यात पहिले येऊन जर तेच खाऊन गेलं तर आमच्या जे टार्गेट स्पीशीज आहेत त्यांना काहीच मिळणार. तर त्यांना अवॉइड करण्यासाठी मग आम्हाला काही असे डमी ट्रॅक प्लॉट बनवावे लागतात की जिकडे आम्ही फक्त बेट टाकतो आणि इकडे आम्ही कॅप्चर करणार नाही आहेत, की जेणेकरून कुत्रे डिस्ट्रॅक्ट व्हावेत.
The most challenge that we had was with jackals. When we were first trying to catch jackals the way we caught foxes, the jackals knew there was something there, and so they would creep up like this. They wouldn't walk, they'd slide along on their forelimbs, for instance. Because they are the ones that are really wary of any human presence in the landscape. And I guess that's how they live. They are adapted to human modified landscapes. They're wary, they view everything with a deep suspicion. So we struggled to catch jackals at first.
जंगल कॅटची गोष्ट आहे. जंगल कॅटला आम्ही जसं फुटहोल्डमध्ये पकडतो तसं आम्ही बॉक्स ट्रॅपमध्ये पण पकडतो. तर बॉक्स ट्रॅपच्या जाळीची जी साईज होती साधारणपणे 1 इंच बाय 1 इंच होती. तर ती पुढून एंटर करायची वेळी जंगल कॅट पाठीमागून जायचे आणि पंजानी बेट असं नखात अडकवून बाहेर ओढून तेवढा 1 इंचाच्या चौकोनातनं पण बेट पळवायचे आणि निघून जायचे. पण बेसिक जो प्रॉब्लेम होता की तो ॲनिमल ट्रॅप अवॉइड करतो आहे. मग त्याच्यामध्ये आम्हाला आमच्या ट्रॅपिंगची डिझाईन्सच वारंवार बदलावी लागली.
4 years into the project, the team had deployed camera traps at hundreds of locations. At several sites, they had a surprise visitor, the striped hyena. Being scavengers, they were seen at carcasses and poultry waste. Soon, dens and resting sites were found. The striped hyenas were not just transient visitors, but permanent residents.
You know, once we started working this landscape and we said, oh my God, there are also hyenas here. We said we have to figure out what's going on with them. The hyena part of the project is in collaboration with the Pune Wildlife Division. And they gave us a small grant to start the hyena work, to get the first collars in.
Now, the way which Abhi is doing work on these jackals and foxes, what they exactly want to do, why they are doing research for this. Once we understand it, then we say, yes, what are the findings you will get, you tell us those findings also. So it will be easy for us to implement it. Now we know that along with the tiger, we have to concentrate on the lesser mammals, lesser animals also. And this is what research is helping us. And once we get that idea, at each and every stage of ecosystem or the niche or the food chain, we can concentrate on all, and that will definitely have effective and better wildlife management. So that is the best part when the researcher and forest department, they work together.
For the first year or so, we had some challenges, you know, locating areas where they would rest and finding places where we could trap them efficiently. And this is the time when I decided to get in touch with people from the GrassLand Trust, because I knew of their work. I know they'd been working in the Pune area for many years, and they've been doing good work monitoring populations of carnivores in this landscape.
So we at the GrassLand Trust mainly focus on the wildlife that exists around the big cities like Pune, Nagar, Nashik, and this wildlife lives outside protected areas. Till recently, Trust's main activity has been to monitor all the large carnivores, which is mainly wolves, hyenas and leopards, around the cities where they are living in highly human-dominated landscapes. Because of their shy nature, because of the terrain, because of perfect hiding spaces that they have, it's very difficult to do this direct sighting, let alone the observations that you want to actually record or do later.
So with hyenas, we had challenges in terms of, you know, they're large bodied than all the other species that we worked with. So we had to get much larger traps. Because we tried using traps that were one size bigger than what we had used for jackals, and they still managed to just pull their foot out of the trap and run away. So then we had to get traps that would potentially work for leopards to trap hyenas. The other challenge was finding areas that they visited regularly, you know, where we were certain of trapping them, either close to an area that they rested in, or a path that they would use regularly. So trying to find out all those things took some time for us. We'll be reaching the location shortly now, where the hyenas have been resting, and let's see how the day goes.
पैर निकाल के भाग गए।
वो कैसे चल रहा था, मुझे लगा कि
ट्रैप लेके
चला गया वो. Okay, it's taken its leg out of the trap. Okay, you can see the hair.
Rubber came out.
Oh, look. Okay, so we'll have to try and figure out what happened, why this happened.
Yes.
Okay, but definitely got caught, definitely triggered.
Yes.
It's eaten bait from here. I mean, this is a matter of chance. Usually this doesn't happen. It must have, just had it must have been caught at the very tip for it to come out of this trap, because we've caught hyenas before. So we'll have to try and check the trap itself to see what the issue is.
Is rubber got damaged?
No, the rubber is fine. I think it's just, man, these things are big, they're powerful. Okay, and this is one of the challenges we face. These are big animals.
This project has now completed 7 years and has seen many firsts. For the first time, high-resolution movement data on foxes, jungle cats and jackals have been captured. For the first time, a whole community of mesocarnivores have been collared in the same landscape. For the first time, such a large wildlife study has been done in a human-dominated landscape.
So the data that we've obtained from this project has allowed us to really gain some incredible insights into how these animals use these landscapes. We published a paper recently. Anjan Kirtana was the lead author on he's a PhD student on this project. So we published a paper recently on this that for the first time describes home ranges for jungle cats globally, also generates robust home ranges for golden jackals and Indian foxes. And what we found is that Indian foxes, as expected, are grassland specialists. They for all their activities and over all seasons are found mainly in grassland. That's the main habitat that they use. They avoid all the other human modified landscapes. Once the grassland habitat goes, the foxes also go with them. So although they may be common now, over time, as these grassland habitats disappear, they will also disappear. Whereas golden jackals are very happy using all the agricultural landscapes. So they are mostly found in the agricultural landscapes. And jungle cats use human modified landscapes, they use agricultural fields, they use sugarcane fields, they use grasslands. So they're found across this entire landscape way more than any of these other species are, and potentially they're the most common wild carnivore in this landscape. They even walk into villages, they walk into the city. Our GPS tracking has shown that they're found in Baramati city, they're walking the streets there. So they're really adaptable to these landscapes. This is a species that we know nothing about. These are the first estimates of jungle cat home ranges and movement globally. So, jungle cats are special to study in that sense as well.
The data from this project has started to paint a more complete picture of how these animals use these rapidly changing landscapes. The landscape and animals in it have started talking to us in a language we can decipher. There are clues embedded within the data that tell us how to learn to coexist with these species and how they are learning to coexist with us.
We want to know how animals that use the shared environment are living around us. What are they doing? So from that perspective, it's important to that. Other studies globally have used these kinds of telemetry data to understand how animals move. Another practical application for collaring data, or for this kind of movement data, we hear every year or literally every month, elephants get run over by trains. If we collared elephants in those landscapes where railway lines pass through them, then we can put what's called a virtual fence around those railway lines. And anytime elephants come close to that virtual fence, it can send an alarm to those two train drivers in that area to watch out for those elephants, slow the trains down. So that allows safe passage.
So we can study animals for the sake of studying animals, and that would be my initial passion. However, I'll give you a couple of really interesting examples. So the California condor. right? It's endangered, and we need to keep track of where they're going. And they seem to be, as a large bird, interacting with human structures like windmills. By tracking the movements, we know where they're going, and we know if they're going into danger zones, right? We can warn people, we'll shut it down, that's an hour of people's time taken away, but big deal, but we've saved the condor.
Conservation in India has had a very narrow focus, with most efforts restricted to a few protected areas. But about 70% of the wildlife in India lives outside these protected areas. Grasslands cover over 15% of geographical land in India. But this huge landmass is barely represented in the protected area map. As our landscapes change rapidly, our study provides us knowledge about the thresholds beyond which some species of wildlife may not be part of our shared lives. Using this information, we are now able to provide recommendations that could inform policy on the grasslands. This can pave way for the less charismatic species that depend on these grasslands to continue to live alongside us and not become mere footnotes in the conservation history of India.
One of the unfortunate legacies of the British colonial rule in India was that they imagined all of India as being forested landscapes, and that anything that was not forested was then degraded. So unfortunately, they considered most of the savanna, natural savanna grasslands in India to be not important from a forestry perspective. We have large tracts of savanna grasslands. Now these savanna grasslands are fairly similar to what you see in other parts of the world, including in Africa or in Australia. There's a reason to call it the correct name, because by calling it a forest, you assume that there should be trees in it, because that's what people's imagination of a forest is. So if you don't see trees, then it's degraded. Okay, that means the trees have all been cut down and removed. So what should we do? We should plant trees back in here, right? But no, that's a ecologically incorrect view of this landscape, because these areas occur in a climatic zone that never naturally supported forests. And some of these areas have been this way for millions of years. They're not new. But unfortunately, grasslands in India are treated as what's called wastelands. So there's an official government policy that treats most grasslands or most savanna ecosystems in India as wastelands. And the government's policy is to then convert these wastelands to more productive uses. There's something published every few years called the Wasteland Atlas of India. It's published by the Ministry of Rural Development, where all these areas are classified as wastelands, and then ministries are given targets to convert wastelands to more productive uses. So we lose out on all of these habitats.
So when we're tracking the mesocarnivores here, they're small, they don't have the human wildlife impact that something like an elephant does, or even something like a tiger. Tracking them to understand how they use the landscape. So do they, at certain times of the year, for example, need to make a long jump to seek something special to eat elsewhere? And if that means that they need to cross the road, if we know that, we can put up signage. And that will prevent us for slow traffic down, just at little times of the year when animals need to cross the road. We're going to build our roads and we need to move on with our lives, right? And so having that information allows us to either slow traffic down just for those periods of time, or allows us to divert human activities just for that period of time. And keeping track of where animals go and what they find important on the landscape allows us to align our activities with their activities. A lot of animals are early warning systems for weather events. How do animals respond? Do they need more space? Do they need different kind of space? Is that telling us something about the food they eat? So using animals as indicators of nature is a tool that we should be tapping into. They actually know the environment better than we do. I see ecological studies like ours to be a tool for education. Can you just imagine if we had school children come out to a landscape like this and be able to say that we have foxes and jackals, jungle cats, wolves, hyenas, all here in their neighborhood, right outside their classroom. Can you imagine these school children educating each other about the world they actually live in? That to me is how ecology and studies like ours can make impacts to everybody's lives. So if we're thinking about coexistence, right, which we should, because we share this planet, right? There's coexistence where we live our lives and they live their lives, like wildlife live their lives and we exist. But there's coexistence where we understand their lives and we either try to make their lives better or we know how to work our lives around their life. And children who know about their environment, who know the animals that are being tracked and are excited about those things, are the kinds of stewards of nature that we can hope for the future.
The future of conservation in India depends on us rediscovering our ability to live with wildlife, just as wild animals are learning to live with us. Sometimes it requires fairly small changes in the way we change our landscapes to allow these animals that share these landscapes with us to continue to thrive in them. Every large city in India has wildlife, sometimes half an hour, sometimes 1 hour away from its borders. This includes large mammals such as jackals, leopards, and even elephants. They're in their own backyard. They are learning to live with humans. It's time that we learn to live with them as well before they're lost forever.